Council for Research, which is abbreviated as CCRAS. The CCRAS is the arm of the Ministry of Ayush, tasked with research in Ayurveda. And there is outpost in many different cities across India. We worked with the one that is in Bangalore, shown in this picture. And my two co-authors in this work are Dr. Sulochana Bhatt and Dr. Shubhashri. So let's start this particular webinar with a question. You know, we title the talk is Traditional Foods of Karnataka, but I want to ask you participants, what is a traditional food? You can put it in the chat box or you can unmute and speak. I mean, we all eat food every day and we say that this is my grandmother's recipe or this is something that is common in my community. But how would you define a traditional food? Is it sufficient to say that it's something your grandma made? Okay, we have got a couple of traditional foods are dishes that are passed down through families or cultural groups for many years. That's right. Sunena and Pranati have given more or less the same response. Food have ancestors have eaten for 3 generations. Sunena also says that it's of cultural significance. So I think, you know, this itself tells you, Srinidhi says it's specific to a region, evolved based on climatic conditions, availability. Absolutely. But, you know, many of you who have joined this webinar are scientists, and scientists love very precise definitions, right? So how would you even untangle any of these responses as a definition, right? Is the sambar that is cooked in your house a traditional food, or is the sambar cooked in my house a traditional food? Because we know that just like garam masala, sambar powders are so different across households, right? The sambar itself might be a traditional dish, but the recipe, now who can claim what was the traditional recipe? So you see, there is a lot of nuance in this idea of traditional foods. And it is not just to do with an empirical observation. As many of you have pointed out, one of the key features of a traditional food is to show intergenerational transference. So yes, what my grandmother makes, if my mother also makes, and if I also make, we could consider that intergenerational transfer, and so a traditional food. How many transfers would we consider to make it a traditional food? As somebody here already pointed out, 3 generations. So if I were to take that definition of 3 generations, intergenerational movement, you know, the most popular traditional food of Bangalore, can anyone guess what it might become? We are, of course, in Bangalore. Just take a guess. Yes, Rutuja?
Idli.
Idli. Okay. Tatte idli.
Will it be gobi
All right.
Manchurian?
That's right. Gobi Manchurian. Ding, 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 ding. Because, you know, it has been in Bangalore for the last 50 years. So it fits the operational definition of a traditional food because, yes, my grandma didn't cook it, but she certainly enjoyed eating it, as did my mom and as do I, right? So traditional food is a very funny definition because it doesn't mean something that was eaten only 2,000 years ago or something that was eaten 1,000 years ago. It can mean something that was just eaten in the last 50 years. And therefore, traditional food is continuously evolving. We should not think of traditional foods as static structures. And hopefully that will also come out when we discuss some of the recipes that we documented in this particular book. So the EU, being the EU, has a very stringent definition for what is considered a traditional food. They have a number for this particular ruling. So they described traditional foods as a subset of novel food, especially for those that come from outside the EU. And it is defined as anything that comes from plants, microorganisms, fungi, algae, and animals. And it has to be safely consumed in that country for at least 25 years. And then it may qualify. Notice how, it's so beautifully worded. There's a lot of nuance in this definition. But unfortunately, that's the only definition we've got to go right now in terms of legal definitions. So in our project, we decided that anything that anybody told us that they cooked in their house was traditional, right? And if that particular recipe name came up again and again and again by people in that community, we would consider them traditional foods, right? So if the word gobi Manchurian came up, to saturation when we talk to people in the community, we said, fine, we will just accept that as a traditional food. So I thought I will just anchor and tell you what I will talk in this webinar. One is I wanted to discuss through our project in terms of the work that all of you are doing in terms of food systems. What are the foods telling us about geography, traditions, and eating practices? The methodology that we follow to document traditional foods, and as Srijata mentioned, a little bit about the Ayurvedic perspective on food classification and relationship with the individual who's going to eat the food. This work was primarily executed by Vaishali and Sadashiv, two fantastic employees that I had the opportunity to work with. And if at all there's anybody on this webinar looking for food documentation expertise, please reach out. They're both available and now freelancing for recipe documentation. The other person I want to acknowledge whose picture I didn't put here is Dr. Subramanya. He's a close colleague and an Ayurveda physician at TDU with whom this project was executed. We are also extremely grateful to a lot of people who very lovingly shared recipes for this particular project. We had a set of committee members who oversaw not our choice of recipes, but our methodology, because something like this over the state of a single state in India was not attempted before. So we decided to have a committee that had a nutritionist, somebody who works in agriculture, somebody who works in media and culinary science, and a homemaker. And we felt that, with that, we would get different perspectives that would be helpful for this project. I'd also like to acknowledge Bharat Haridas, who is responsible for this beautiful cover and all that has gone into the book that has been created. So when we started out this project, like every good funding agency asks you, we were told, well, tell us what your objectives are. And because CCRAS is a funding agency that deals mostly with medical projects, they said, well, you should have a primary objective and a secondary objective. So these were for us to collect 100 traditional food recipes based on geography, crop distribution, food cultures of Karnataka in a standardized format. So I think this is where I would say that scientific thinking and methodology came into place. It is not the recipe itself, but how do you collect information in a standard, reproducible manner? Then, of course, the analysis, and we have performed this analysis on the recipes in 2 dimensions, Ayurvedic and nutritional. And then we were tasked with putting this information into a book and a YouTube channel. And although originally it was an ebook, as the project went along, we realized that people would use it only if they could have a physical copy. And so it's a physical book, although anyone is free to download the book from my faculty website on TDU as the PDF. So how do you, develop a system to look at traditional foods across Karnataka, because I am sure just in my own apartment building of 72 flats, if I wanted to recce and find out traditional foods, I will get, more than 1,000 recipes. So what we decided is that we will use the first marker of geography to map out what Karnataka is like in terms of its agroclimatic zones. Now, these are terminologies and agricultural scientists or ecologists are very familiar with. These are basically zones that are determining what are the climatic conditions. And as you would expect, how these climatic conditions would drive the agricultural practices and produce, right? So I apologize for this very small lettering on this map, but this is the state of Karnataka, and Karnataka has 10 agroclimatic zones. Starting from North Karnataka, it's very dry part of the country. In even the border areas over here, especially in Andhra and Telangana, are very, very dry. And as you start to go west, it starts to become wetter and wetter. And actually, this particular part of Karnataka is right next to Goa. So you can imagine that it is wet and very undulating. So there are hills and things that are height. And this is where the Western Ghats cuts across Karnataka and sort of ends here and meets the Eastern Ghats from this side of the country. So we have very dry going to wet and a very pristine zone, the Western Ghats. On this side, we have coastal cuisines and coastal Karnataka, right, exposed to the Arabian Sea. And as you start to move back east again, you start to encounter very dry climates, right? Out here in South Karnataka, due to the abundance of rivers, you will again find that although the climatic conditions are drier than, say, Goa, they are certainly very amenable for rice and pulses. Basically, you can have 3 seasons of growing if you wanted in this particular part of the country. In addition, there is a bit of a rise here because at the bottom here, the Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats are meeting. And again, as you start to go east, and this is where Bangalore is, you start to experience drier climates. Now, of course, one could argue that irrigation has changed what sort of crops are available, certainly, but it has not changed so much the eating habits of what people practice in those traditional zones. So the idea of benchmarking traditional food against geography is that, you see, in India, there has been an evolution of food according to the place that you live in. And only in the last maybe 100 years or so, there has been an increased amount of transportation and movement in the country. So for the largest part, people usually ate, what was grown around in them. So in drier regions, we would find drier foods and also methods to process the food so that dry food can become soft or unctuous. The example I will take is jawar, right? Jawar is a very drying food. In fact, even Ayurveda says that it is ruksha in nature. And Jawari roti in North Karnataka is eaten with something that is unctuous, which is a little oily, and that is peanuts. So you will find peanuts in a lot of North Karnataka food. It stays well, it grows well in dry regions, and it has that unctuousness. Peanut, gives you groundnut oil, right? On the other hand, when we came to the Western Ghats, it was so interesting that there is the windward and the leeward side, right? So this side, which is closer to the coastal regions, had a tradition of eating sea fish, whereas the leeward side had a tradition of eating river fishes, because just getting the fish from the coast and going over the hill was a bit of a issue. And I think not anymore. It is easy to access. But, one of our respondents told us, but we don't have a practice of eating it. So those some practices that just die very, very hard. And then when you come down to South Karnataka, you'll find that there is still millet usage, but it is not jawar, which is very dry. It is ragi, right? So in terms of millet properties, ragi also is dry, but it's not as drying as jawar. And you will see that most people will not eat it in a roti format, which is what is popular in North Karnataka. They will have it as a uh, steamed preparation, the ragi mudde. So what I'm trying to give you here is basically a taste of how the local consumption patterns change according to the geography and according to Ayurvedic properties as well, which of course the lay person is not accounting for when they eat their traditional foods, but it very beautifully matches that of traditional knowledge. So how did we systematically, try and put down traditional foods of Karnataka? So we had these agroclimatic zones. We identified 22 locations, putting a pin on a tier 2 town. And these locations were also intersecting with other things such as rainfall and population density. So we had 22 locations, and we considered an 80-kilometer radius around this location to be belonging to that particular region or agroclimatic zone. So that gave us, a pretty extensive coverage of Karnataka. You can see over here, almost 80 to 85% of Karnataka is covered by this particular methodology. Then we asked, okay, what do we know about the foods in this place already? So luckily, government websites have a lot of information on what's grown, what's a GI tagged food, what are the type of communities like live there. So one very interesting thing, this will happen to us in Mangalore. So along the coast, Muslim, Christian, and Hindu communities live side by side. They're using the same products, but interestingly, they are using them differently in their communities. And there are, of course, some things that are eaten in all three community households. But it was interesting to see what the variations are based on the next sort of level of evolution, which is religious or cultural in nature. Okay, so we would prepare a top sheet, and we would also look at some gray literature. We looked at YouTube channels to see if anybody was, documenting traditional foods from that particular region. In North Karnataka, not many people are documenting recipes. Udupi is very, very popular for documentation. You'll see lots of YouTube videos on Udupi, Malnad, in the Western Ghats. And of course, Bangalore is a lot more cosmopolitan. You won't find super traditional recipes coming out from Bangalore blogs. But what we found is that, this also tells you that there is an inequality in the kind of information that is available, right? Which I think in today's day and age does prejudice you into thinking about what is traditional and what is not traditional. It is only now in the last 5 years that I've started seeing a lot more North Karnataka high-end establishments in Bangalore, for example. Otherwise, you will see these khanavallis, but there will be some rickety little khanavalli in a booth, with an auntie doling out javari roti. But now I can see that it's coming up. But since this is a food systems conversation, I thought this is something you must be encountering and be aware of, that there is a lot of inequality in the food perspective, simply because some areas are much more highly represented, such as Udupi, as opposed to others, such as Raichur. So, okay, so we made up something called a top sheet. We got as much literature information as we could. And then we started to talk to people. So we followed something called a snowball sampling, which is, I would call my friend and ask my friend if she knew somebody in Raichur, and so on and so forth. So we had a Google form to collect information. So we got some from there. But we found that just talking to people helped us a lot, because we were also interested in speaking to those people who knew about traditional foods and recipes. It's just not random people. So it was a sort of a snowball sampling of, but of a particular type of person. And what Vaishali and Sadashiv would do is have an extensive conversation with this person. We just call this the snake interview technique. But what we did is we discussed with them, what was that particular season. We would start with a religious festival, and then we would work our way around the entire year. Now, this is a very important aspect of documentation, because see, people get tired. As it is, they're doing you a favor by talking to you about what they know, but they also get tired. And food is something which is so personal that you may not necessarily recall everything if I ask you in an interview, right? And especially if I want to know sort of a very broadly whatever you eat, right? Just imagine if I were to come, ring your doorbell, ding dong, and say, so what did you eat yesterday? What are your traditional foods? You'll give me some explanation, but you will also feel that you're missing out on things. So to help people along, we had first a yearly structure based on festivals, which we would already know for that particular reason. Then we would go for season. Then we would go for life cycle. So infants, young children, pregnant lactating women, older people, etc. And if that person was still engaged, then we would continue to talk to them about any medicinal practices, because after all, this was also an Ayurveda project. What were the traditional medicinal plants that they were using, and so forth. So each interview took us about an hour, hour and a half. Sometimes an interview was broken up into 3 or 4 phone calls. And after the interview was done, Aishali and Sadashiv would just write down the names of the recipes that they received from this person. And what would happen, we saw with these conversations, is that in an area, somewhere between 7 to 11 respondents will help us reach saturation. So saturation is when, we're hearing the same recipe name again and again and again. Mind you, at this time, we are not collecting recipes. We are simply collecting names of food dishes. Hurlikal Saru, Oppattu. So we're just collecting the names, and based on our own paperwork, we know some of the ingredients that go into it, because we found very early on that if we start asking people for recipes, we would never get to the end of all the foods that we wanted them to describe. So this technique was very important to ensure that we get recipe names, and we get as many recipe names as possible. And once we felt that we were getting the same recipes names again and again and again, we concluded that we had reached saturation, and we stopped speaking to respondents. So here are some pictures of Vaishali and Sadashiv on the field. This is where, you can see this is somebody's home in whom this has been shot. And also this is somebody's home that has been shot. So it's very interesting to us, because, people want to talk about food, and they are very happy to share their food practices. We were welcomed into a number of homes across Karnataka. We also went to the local markets to find out what is being grown and what people eat. Vaishali and Sadashiv spent a whole day with goat herders, who were basically eating and drinking just goat milk to survive. Okay, so once we finished doing some paperwork at our end in terms of recipe identification, we would do a shortlisting, which was again empirical. We chose recipes that were unique, but not so unique in terms of ingredient that nobody could try them out. We chose things with GI foods in them. We chose things we thought had a precedence in Ayurveda. So there are cooking books, Bhojanaha Kutuhalam, Kshima Kutuhalam. These are 17th century Ayurveda books. There are also some recipes mentioned in the Samhitas. So Dr. Subramania was very key to ensure that, we picked recipes that resonated with these classical texts. So based on that, and based on our 100 recipes objective, we shortlisted about 128. And for each location, Vaishali and Sadashiv would travel to that particular home and speak to that auntie. There were some uncles as well, but majority were aunties, and then have that person cook that particular food in their own house, in their own kitchen with all their implements. So ultimately, we covered about 12,000 kilometers. We had about 115 final contributors and a total recipe of about 128. In the book, we decided that we will call out recipes based on the Ayurvedic way of consumption, which is very intuitive. Pita, which is something to drink, Lidha, which is something to lick. And this is something very uniquely Indian, how many of you will put a chutney or a pickle on the side of your plate, and you will notice that when you eat it, you will just take your index finger and then, just give it a lick. And that's an very uniquely Indian thing in terms of food consumption. So these are what are called lickables. Then we had some things that are just eatables. Now, not really requiring maybe chewing, but just something that requires to be eaten. And then khadita is something that requires to be chewed. So we grouped our recipes in these 4 broad categories. And what we did is analyze the recipes nutritionally using a software called DietCal, and Ayurvedically using Ashta Ahara Vidhi Vishesha Ayatana, which is the 8 principles of dietetics that has been summarized in a shloka in a text called Charak Samhita. So I've been yammering on for about 30 minutes. I will stop here to take if there are any questions or anything you want me to go over before we dive into the recipes.
I have a question. Please tell us about the Charak Samhita. And there's a
Okay.
question in the chat as well.
Okay. Oh, this is like a trick question. Sunaina could make a good teacher. What is the difference between ethnic food and traditional food? I have no idea, Sunaina. For me, traditional and ethnic, they can more or less be clumped together. A traditional food can definitely belong to a particular ethnicity, for example. And I think they are overlapping terms, but that's just me speaking on the top of my head. I have not come across this term in terms of the scientific landscape of traditional food knowledge. If there's anybody else here in the participants who knows this answer, please do come in.
Okay, I have a query.
Yes.
Yeah, Gautam Dandekar from Mumbai.
Yes.
So when you did all these surveys, and now I'm seeing this recipe analysis, nutritional and Ayurvedic.
Yes.
So did it give any insights in terms of the traditional foods, in terms of the protein profile, the carb profile, the fats, the
Yes.
micronutrients, and is it a complete essential diet, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
Let me
one.
just.
That is first part. That is first part of the question. Secondly, how is this traditional foods changing as per the climate from January to December, right? And
Yes.
typically in those seasons, which kind of diseases are more prevalent? So that this could have been our forefathers' protection against those diseases in those seasons. So
Correct.
has any pairing, matching done, and then comes the Ayurvedic perspective. Okay, this food and Ayurveda, how much do they match? Something
So
like that.
how about I answer all of these questions by taking one recipe and dissecting it out? Because I think
Sure.
that will be the easiest way to answer all of these questions, right?
Right. Acha, and in this traditional foods, 100 years back, 200 years back, was gehu a part of it?
Yes,
Wheat.
wheat is back to Harappan civilizations. We always eat wheat.
Okay, great.
Right. Okay. So just to answer Rituja's question before I move on, Ashta Ahara Vidhi Vishesha Ayatna, Ashta Ahara, 8 dietetic Vidhi, that is knowledge systems, is a framework that we have adopted. And when I do the recipe analysis, take you over the 8 aspects that we have analyzed for a particular recipe, right? Okay. So here is one recipe to walk you over some of the questions that Gautam asked and what Rituja asked. Let's talk about Hurli Kalu Oppattu. Right now, anybody who has eaten Puran Poli, since somebody is here from Mumbai, the poli, the whole idea of having a stuffing inside a cereal, right? Poli or parathas, etc. So the obbatu is one in that variant, right? But we chose this recipe because of the uniqueness of the stuffing. Hurli kalu. Hurli kalu is a horse gram. Now the word gram actually is a derivative of garo, which is how the Portuguese used to call these pulses, right? But in traditional Indian language, it is kalu or a bean, right? Hurli kalu. Now, hurli kalu is a very badnam bean in some ways because, horse gram, it's deathly cheap, right? And it is considered inferior, right? But if you look at the nutritional profile of hurli, it is as good as a arhar, which is tur dal or a moong dal or urad dal, okay? Is as good in terms of the protein content, right? And this hurli kalu has a very interesting taste to it, which gives it slightly different physiological properties as per the Ayurvedic perspective. So as Gautam asked, here is the nutrient information for this particular traditional food. This food is, of course, rich in carbohydrates because it is a sweet dish. And so it has a high amount of sugar in it. But as you can see, it also has 13 grams of protein per 100 grams. And it is also rich in iron and calcium because it is, after all, a dal that is stuffed inside a bread. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about the Ayurvedic perspective, the 8 principles, and take you over each one of these words. Upayokta is who should eat this food. Is this Hurli Kal Obattu suitable for everybody? So Ayurveda would say, yeah, everyone can eat it, but you have to be a little mindful as it will increase kapha dosha. Now, we wanted to increase people's curiosity for the book, which is why we've not spent much at all time in talking about Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, the 3 factors in Ayurveda, which is supposed to be maintained in some balance in your body for good health, right? So it is suitable for all doshas, but if you are somebody who is overweight, if you are somebody who tends to metabolize very slowly, then you have to be eating this in moderation or very, very less amounts. Then comes Prakriti or the food characteristics. Now, in modern nutrition science, we will say, oh, it has this much protein, carbohydrates. I can go even a little more deeper dive. I can do the types of proteins it has. I can look at the amino acid profiles. I can look at the mineral and vitamin content, etc. Whereas the Ayurvedic way of understanding a food is completely experiential. So let's look at horse gram or kulatta. So one way we know that it has been traditionally consumed is that even in Charak Samhita, which is dated to 1500 BCE, you will see the mention of the word kulatta. All right. And the way it is in the Sanskrit text, there's like an entire chapter that says, these are all the grains, these are all the meats, these are all the beans, these are all the greens, these are all the fruits. So the word kulatta comes under the grain section, right? Now, kulatta is bitter and astringent to taste. In Ayurveda, there are 6 tastes: Madhura, Amla, Lavana, Katu, Tikta, Kashaya. Sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, astringent. And out of these 6 tastes, horse gram has 2. Now, even this taste of horse gram has a physiological benefit, which is that it will be good for those individuals who want to have some sort of a heavy meal, but they also want it to be digested easily. Horse gram is drying in nature, which is why any traditional recipe with horse gram, and we have 2-3 recipes in our book, will involve something unctuous. In this particular case, there is wheat, which is a little unctuous. There's also oil that you use to make the poli itself, that also gives unctuousness. Other horse gram recipes, we have seen the usage of curd or buttermilk, which is unctuous in nature. So traditional food processing methods seem to intuitively balance the Ayurvedic properties. And finally, horse gram is hot in potency. So therefore, you will not consume it in large quantities in the hot season because it is just going to make you feel warm. It is ideally something that would be consumed in the cooler seasons. And you will see that logic playing out when we do the other 6 characteristics. Karana is processing methods. Draining the horse gram helps reduce phytates in the final dish. So the methodology of cooking is to take this horse gram and soak it overnight. And interestingly enough, that water is never used for cooking, and the water actually contains molecules called phytates, which go on to chelate a lot of ions, and we know that from a modern nutritional point of view. The second way to think about karana, which is not mentioned here, is also boiling and cooking the horse gram before you make the poli. So you are making it easy for digestion. Then comes Samayoga. Now, interestingly, in North Karnataka, horse gram obbattu is not eaten just as a poli, it is eaten with ghee and milk. Both are products, according to Ayurveda, that will reduce the heat intensity and make it cooling, which is why this particular recipe, even though it has something that is hot in potency, is suitable for all doshas, because by the time you add the ghee and the milk, it becomes a balanced dish. It is suitable for all habitats, but I will point out here that this particular recipe is from Chikkaballapur, which is in a little bit of a dry zone. A lot of horse gram is also eaten in North Karnataka and drier parts of India because it is a bean that does fine in drought-like conditions, does not need a lot of water, number one. Number two, it is also a very popular intercrop. So it is placed in between other cereals and just allowed to grow on its own. Best avoided in summer, like I said, because of the hot potency and warm climates, and suitable for all persons. So here in Kala or time, we talk about the season that it is usually eaten in, the age of the person who eats it. Now, this is something that will be heavy to digest. So it will be ideal for people who are adults, not for older people if their digestive system is not as strong. And the time at which it needs to be consumed. The bottom line in Ayurveda is consume the heaviest meal in the afternoon. Your midday meal should be your biggest meal. All other meals are small, and definitely the night meal has to be very, very small and eaten early. So this obbattu is best had in the midday meal time. Rashi is the quantity of food. Now, the Ayurvedic perspective is not in terms of grams or cups or spoons. It is for you as an individual to figure out what would be a good quantity to be eaten in moderation. It is heavy to digest. And I think we all intuitively know how our digestion does. I mean, if 10 of us go and eat biryani today, we are all not going to feel the same way after, chugging down a kg or 1.25 kgs of biryani. So if we know our digestive system is weak or poor, then we should not have Hurlikal Opattu. And that's why we also say eat as per Agni, because your Agni or digestive fire has to be good to assimilate this particular product. Finally, Upayoga Samastha. What are the rules for eating? So there are quite a lot of rules. Do not eat fast, do not eat slow, try and eat in a place that is quiet, clean. Many of these sound very intuitive. So here we have added hints simply that is relevant to this particular recipe. Preferably consume warm, that will help with digestion, and can be consumed as part of a meal or by itself. Not all foods are things that you can consume by themselves. This Hurlikal Opattu is a very good example of a food that stays well and can be packed for long trips. It will give you carbs, proteins, and minerals to keep you going. In the recipe book, we have a QR code for each recipe. So if anybody scans this QR code, it will take you to the preparation of this recipe in the respondent's house. For technical issues and reasons, I decided not to play the video of the preparation. I strongly encourage you to go and find this out when you download the book or go check out our YouTube channel. Thank you, Praniti. She's given a nice explanation for what is traditional food and ethnic food. I've learned something new today. Right. So I think I will not share any more recipes because we have about 12 minutes left and I'd like to have a conversation. So here, the conversation is going to be about foraging and greens. So this is leaves from the bilva tree. The bilva tree is associated with Shiva. It has leaves that are shaped like the trident. So you can see 1, 2, 3 trident. And this is a recipe that comes from coastal and Western Ghats region of Karnataka called a tambuli. Now, in a tambuli, you can add more or less any greens that you want. And here we've just chosen a slightly more exotic green called bilva. And tambuli's other ingredients are coconut, jeera, pepper, and ghee, which you just roast and then mix. You grind and then you mix it with buttermilk or with curd. Right. So I wanted to point out many things that you all are aware of already in your own gardens, probably, or if you're just walking down the side of the road. These are all pictures that I have taken just in my own little apartment complex of leaves that you can put into a tambuli. So this is the Ioxora leaf. This is Punarnava. Here are Honge Sattu and guava. You can also use tender mango leaves. Now the guava, mango, all of these have to be super tender in order to be used for the tambuli. So with that, I'll stop here. I'll open it up for discussions, and I also welcome participants to share what are the greens they eat that they think can be put into this recipe.
Yeah, these greens are really interesting. I never heard of that, having guava in a food dish. I never seen the other greens. I just heard of a guava leaf tea or a mango leaf tea, but to consume, I did not know about that.
Yes.
This is very
Great.
interesting.
I hope you will try it out. And just make sure that it has to be tender. So when
Yeah.
you're plucking the leaf, you should hear a tuck sound and it should not be very hard for you to pluck the leaf. That's the sign that it's ready for consumption.
So other than this 1, 2, 3, 4, are there any more other leaves which you have researched for this book other than this 4?
So when we, one moment, I'll just close the door. Yes, so we did look at other leaves that can be put in tambuli, and you will find that in the book as well. we have a chutney of about 8 leaves, all that are just foraged from different trees, including the cashew tree. I can't give you a number. Ever since we started documenting this book, I'm already up to about 45 or so, the type of leaves that can be used in a tamboli preparation.
Wow, and this you have seen only in Karnataka. So there might
And
be
yes,
many more pan India.
absolutely, absolutely. In fact, my next slide, I will show you a tree. You have all seen it. It's a Bohemia Kachanar tree. And only 2 months ago, I learned that groups in Chhattisgarh cook up the tender leaves of kachanar just like you would palak, with a little bit of onion and some mustard oil. So yes, there is a wealth of foraged greens that are consumed in India, which I think even living in the cities, we can very easily consume. We just don't know about them.
True.
That's right. Kachanar is consumed. Yes, when I looked it up, it's consumed in a lot of different Indian cuisines. So Monica is asking if we're going to update the book. No, project is over and done. If I can find a sponsor, certainly I'd love to keep updating the book. And in fact, even turn it into a website, but we're looking for money to do those things.
Ma'am, can you share the link to download the book, please?
Yeah, I can give it to Rutuja and she can send it out. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Someone is asking about amaranth, photolika. I don't know about photolika. So amaranth, many different types of amaranths are used. Ashwagandha, at least as far as our foray has been there, ashwagandha leaves are not consumed. And even in the classical Ayurvedic texts, it is the root that is known, not the leaf. Absolutely, Sunena. The link is also available in the TDU website. Thank you, Archana, for yellow Bohemia's leaves. You know, the other thing that is used in the kachanar is also the flower. So drumstick flower, we have a recipe on that. The kachanar flower can be consumed. Even the ioxora flowers, a little bit of consumption is there. So, what I want to say is that there are many things that we can eat in the environment around us. Many a times we don't see it nicely packaged, in a supermarket, and so we don't know, or we may not be open to consuming those foods. Right. I wanted to leave you here with a summary of this talk. What we learned from this particular exercise. Number one, that traditional foods has evolved to align with the seasons. I just gave you one example. And I think it will also continue to evolve. So I talked about gobi Manchurian at the start. Jackfruit Manchurian is like a very popular dish in the Malnad region because jackfruit is something that is available left, right, and center. And Manchurian is a format that everybody enjoys eating. So, we will find traditional foods keep evolving. Nutrient selection doesn't drive seasonal selection. So what we find is that traditional knowledge has always been around this cereal, bean, and vegetable combination. That is what is there in, at least in Indian cuisine. You will always have a cereal, whether it is ragi, jawar, bajra, rice, gehu. You will always have a bean, aurekal, hurlikal, arhar, rajma, chana, and you will have a vegetable. Now that vegetable, depending on where you are, it can be a pickle, so it can be a mango pickle. It can be something fermented, like in the Northeast, a bamboo dish. Or it can be something that is fresh and porridge that you just quickly do into a stir fry, like the tambali that we just saw with buttermilk. Yeah. So these are like the three main components of cuisines in India. And in a dietary practice, you will always, that will be sort of the bare minimum that we observed. And then you would change these combinations to suit the season or the culinary experience. There are two products which I wanted to talk about, which I tomatoes and chilies. Even though tomatoes and chilies are not native to India, across Karnataka, we found very lovely use of both of these items. No, there was no savory item that did not use chilies. There was no no dish that required a souring agent that did not add a little bit of tomato in it. Now, traditional souring agents are tamarind, raw mango, puranpoli, puttampolli. These are all the Garcinia fruits, either fermented or used by themselves. But we found that our respondents were adding a little bit of tomato anyway to the dishes that they wanted souring agents for. So I think that these things will continue to evolve, and what we consider traditional today may not be what is traditional maybe 1,000 years from now. We also realize that, and this is what our respondents tell us, that traditional food knowledge is disappearing. I don't want to sound romantic about traditional foods. I'm agnostic in that sense, but what we found is that the knowledge is disappearing in terms of just slowing down, convenience eating, right? So, and this is also household practices. Many of the rural households had a little spot with a granite slab where they would pound stuff. And we asked the aunties, do you use this? She's like, no, now I just use it in the mixie or I send it to the mill, right? And from a woman's perspective, that is fantastic because she's got more time on her hands now. Otherwise there's a lot of drudgery involved in cooking. So as much as I like traditional foods and eating traditionally cooked meals, they are highly time consuming. And so they need to probably evolve, and we need to acknowledge a place for women's convenience as well, right? And I think we all can agree on this. A food recipe will survive no matter what, if it is tasty. All right, so let us see. There have been.
That's a great summary to your session, Megha. Maybe we have time for a couple of questions before we wrap.
Meghaji, did you get purslane? We call it ghol in Marathi. That is the only
it's
plant
there.
with omega-3.
Yeah, we have a recipe on that. Yeah.
Great.
Gonni soppu, it's called. Yes, Samarth. Yes.
Yeah. Megha, how much of these foods did you find, were a fusion of foods from other regions? From the time that they were, every food has a age. That this is when
Yes.
it was first made.
Correct.
And how many of these foods can you illustrate examples that you found?
Sorry, Samarth, I think your connection is a bit choppy. Do you mind putting a question in the chat box?
I'm going to start with one question.
Looks
Yeah.
similar to this food from this particular food.
Absolutely. Like I said, you see cereal, pulse, and vegetable. That's your meal. So the hurli or kulatta, what they make in as a sambar or a saru here, is also used as a dal in Himachal. So that's certainly there across regions. There's not that much variation in terms of the format, but there will certainly be a variation in the type of oil that is used, the type of spices that go into it, etc. Right? And when it comes to certain foods, you will see rajma, for example, is still not. I mean, no respondent told us that rajma was a traditional food in Karnataka. So clearly, we don't have that tradition here, at least in Karnataka. But we went to tier 2 cities where rajma was available, but clearly it is not part of the. So it has not got assimilated for whatever reason. So certainly, I think there are. I can spend a lifetime just dissecting the information that we got from this book, I think. And there are commonalities, and then of course there are distinctions as well. I think I answered your question already, Samrat. And Archana says, yes, I love that chasing Soppu. And I have to say that chasing Soppu was one of the inspirations for me to do this project. So chasing Soppu also, by the way, participants, it's a book on greens released by Azim Premji, which is also freely available. Okay. Yes, I think there are questions about the book being available in a public domain. Absolutely. And I will also ask Rituja to send it by email. That's all. Yeah.
Acha beta, thank you.
Ma'am, other than tomato, tamarind, which other, this thing, khatta agents did you find? Because tomato is very recent. That has only come after independence. Tomato consumption has increased.
Right.
But pre-independence, like in North, there's a kachri, which is used as a meat tenderizer.
Correct. So we found raw mango. So sun-dried raw mangoes, the peel of the raw mango, that was used as a souring agent. And I think that's a little bit like amchur also in that sense.
Correct.
But that also includes the seed of the mango. So a lot of the, we don't talk about mango seed, but Ayurveda actually talks about the properties of mango seed and as medicine. Then something called it is Maharashtrians call it kokum, right?
Kokum, yeah.
Yeah. So kokum is a very popular souring agent. We also it's called puranpoli. Again, very popular in the Western Ghats region. It is because the kokum tree is only available in very rainy areas, not in the dry part. Then Kurgis of Karnataka use something called kuchampalli, which is a vinegar that they make from another kokum-like fruit. It's a different Garcia species, but they make it into a vinegar and then they add it in their foods. And of course, there is lemon, always souring agent, lemon tamarind.
Right. Yeah, actually, I was very much interested to look at our food habits pre-independence. Because that time there was no electricity, no refrigeration, no preservation, nothing. Everything had to be cooked fresh and eaten fresh. So that time the way to make foods and make them stay for a long time without spoiling, so that is something which always interests me. And I always felt that that food had more antioxidants, more anti-aging benefits than what we are eating today. So just wanted
Yeah, but that food also had a lot of microbial agents, and that food also gave a lot of diseases. So refrigeration is not a bad thing.
No. I totally agree. Refrigeration is great. I mean, refrigeration has saved a
Gautam,
lot of
I think
things.
we'll wrap this up right now. And I think there's one last question from Monica. We'll just take that and wrap it up. Thank you so much. It's 7, that's why.
Monica, okay. Can you read it out? Because I'm not able.
Monica, did you have a question? You are unmuted.
Oh, sorry. No, I think the question was related to somebody who said I've been documenting the greens and flowers used in India. No, I don't have a question. Might have been just by accident. So sorry.
Okay, amazing. It's actually 7, so we wanted to wrap up on time. Thank you so much, Dr. Megha, for this absolutely wonderful talk. There's so much here to take back and so much to integrate in general life as well. Thank you so much.
And thank you for all the
My
participants.
pleasure. And thank you to the participants for asking me questions and getting me to think.
Megha ji, can I connect with you?
Of course, please. I'll put my email ID here in the chat box. Feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, sure.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining
Good
in.
evening and have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Rutuja. Lovely session.